We have how long it takes to evaluate them. The initial assessment is very quick. We've even, with them coming in Ukrainian, we've even have inside services, language services in our office where we have translators that can translate them pretty quickly. For our first line assessment in our hotline intake to decide whether it first has a nexus to USAID funds and USAID programming. If it does not have a nexus, then we will refer it immediately to either, if it comes in for one of my colleagues here or another agency, we would immediately refer it. For the ones that
what's the most common allegation of fraud?
Procurement fraud, I would say, collusive bidding, the things that are happening at the back end, which I think is really helpful for us to get out in front of. And that's why it's really important for our investigators to go out and do fraud awareness briefings where they identify for procurement officials and contracting officers what to look for. And that's the example that I gave where the contractor spotted this and was able to identify it and report it to us before the bid rigging collusion happened.
Okay. Thank you for that. I see that I'm out of time already, Mr. Chair. That went by fast. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Chair now recognizes Mr. Stanton for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Inspectors General for being here today. This is an important hearing, and you're doing very important work. We have a duty to stand by our allies, to support the Ukrainian people as they defend themselves against the tyrant's unprovoked assault on their sovereignty. Helping Ukraine win this brutal, atrocious war is essential for the future of security in Europe and for preserving democracy in the face of autocracy around the globe. But this committee also has a duty to the American taxpayer to make sure that every single dollar of assistance is spent the way Congress intended, that every single person and every single weapon, sent to aid Ukraine, every single weapon is properly accounted for and does not fall into the hands of bad actors. Now, Congress and the Biden administration built in extensive oversight mechanisms for that very purpose, including the fact that Congress, number one, voted overwhelmingly to require a monthly update to Congress on U.S. security assistance provided to Ukraine. Two, your work with our allies to track all weapon systems before they leave the U.S. and once they are in Ukraine. This includes on-site inspections, which restarted in October. And three, the Department of Defense, State Department, U.S. Agency for International Development created a joint strategic oversight plan. The oversight activities done as part of this plan found that all direct financial aid given to the Ukrainian government was in line with congressional requirements and federal control standards, and that the various United States government's oversight offices, more than 17, are working together to provide comprehensive oversight and regular updates to the American people. But as part of the Joint Strategic Oversight Plan, the Department of Defense's Office of Inspector General found that there is room for improvement in overseeing enhanced end-use monitoring items to trust but verify that arms like Javelin missiles or tools like night vision goggles end up where they are supposed to. Now, by necessity, the U.S. has a limited presence in Ukraine, but we all agree that it is absolutely essential this work is completed regardless. With that in mind, Mr. Storch, can you tell me more about how the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General conducts oversight over the enhanced end-use monitoring items in Ukraine?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. And it is an area in which we are laser focused and will continue to be as long as this continues. So we have sent teams out to the region to gather information regarding what is a evolving situation, obviously. You mentioned our 2020 report where we looked at the way in which end-use monitoring was done, and it generally was compliant. Though there were some issues with the night vision devices. We made some recommendations on that. Most of those have been closed. Then we had the report that came out last fall. Very different situation, ongoing hostilities, war going on. And so we found that under those circumstances that the department was not able to meet what were then existing requirements for EUM, although there were other things, and this is where it gets classified, that the department was doing to keep track of the weaponry that was provided. But the situation continues to change as staffing in the country continues to change. So we have ongoing our third evaluation in this area. And as we are looking to do agile reporting to get out some of those results as we continue to work on the overall project. and then we're already starting to plan for the next one. So I would say it's an iterative process. We're continuing to evolve as the nature of the assistance evolves. We have also, I would say, been able to use the lessons that we learned during COVID, frankly, in terms of how to do some of the remote type of oversight, as we all throughout the world had to learn to do things a little bit differently, right? And so we've been able to apply some of that to our work, and then looking to the future, as has been testified to, we believe it would be helpful to have people posted in country, and we have also engaged the process to start that ball rolling, so that we're able to have people in country are able to interact on a regular basis, both with our American military folks in country and with the Ukrainians, to make sure that the end use monitoring is done. So it's ongoing, it's evolving, and it's robust.
Thank you. And on the issue of staffing, Ms. Shaw, there was only a limited number of civilians allowed at the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv due to security concerns. How is that affecting U.S. oversight of assistance to Ukraine, and what do you think should be the appropriate staffing levels at the embassy?
Thanks for that question, and I realize we're short on time, so I'll try to be concise. We are to date able to produce the oversight that we need to. We've been creative. We've used some remote technologies. We've also engaged with people as they've cycled out of Ukraine into Poland. But we are looking to secure positions in Kyiv that will be hugely helpful, especially for our future work. I don't have an opinion yet on the staffing levels at the embassy. We are doing ongoing work looking at embassy operations, but I do know that in the lessons learned report that we published, that staffing considerations are very important, and so we were happy to arm the department with some of the lessons learned from our past work to help inform these decisions.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Self for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say that my fellow Texan, Mr. Moran, perfectly articulated the 5 concerns that my citizens have as well, so please take those back. I want to go to your strategic oversight plan that the 3 of you signed. You articulated my 2 concerns on page 17 and 18 perfectly. One is internal to USAID, one is external, and I want to follow through the U.S. government to the World Bank to Ukraine. Your first quote that I want to have is, following the February 2022 invasion, you ask approval for an expedited process to do your oversight, and the audit will examine the trade-offs inherent in the accelerated procurement practices to determine whether the mission has developed the procedures necessary to safeguard the award process from undue risk and support to your new strategy in Ukraine. Has that happened? That was well over a year ago now. That's an internal question.
Sure. So the work I think that you're referencing is an ongoing audit that we are working on. Our audits are done to very thorough standards, and we're happy to come and brief you on the status of that.
No,
But
I don't think my question is about the audit itself. It's the internal processes that you put in place so that you can measure the risk of your audit, your accelerated audit, versus the risk of undue fraud or abuse.
Sure.
So I'm asking about your internal processes, not the audit itself.
Yes, so our internal process, what we've done to respond to this new portfolio of work that came to light after the February invasion, is to staff up quickly. And we are doing that in order to look at the agency, USAID, the agency's expedited procurement. So the expedited procurement processes that were approved by the administrator for USAID at the start of the war, which allowed them to reprogram money in Ukraine, because USAID was already programming in Ukraine before the invasion. Right. So the expedited procedures are for USAID internally, and then what we as the OIG will do is to assess whether how well they did that, and did they stick to internal controls and risk mitigation strategies when they repurpose that money.
So what's your analysis of it? It's been over a year.
So some of the funding, I think, took longer, depending on the amount of money. And so one of our audits, it's encompassed in several of our ongoing audits right now, in the humanitarian assistance sector, in the energy sector, and in agriculture. So none of those reports have been issued to date. They are ongoing. Some are planned.
But again, you're talking about the audits themselves. Please assure me that the internal processes within AID have been put in place for your accelerated process to make sure that this is done correctly.
I think two things are sort of being conflated here. One is the U.S. aid, the agency's accelerated procurement actions, and then the second is USAID IG's oversight of those. And what we are doing as USAID OIG is looking at those to make sure that they were done according to USAID's internal plans
Again,
and
I asked,
procedures.
were they? That's the assurance I'm looking for.
So as of right now,
It's over a year.
Yes, as of right now, that work is not complete. So unfortunately, I can't give you an assurance today without that work being complete. But as soon as it is, we're happy to do that.
Okay, I have 1 minute left. Let's talk about the World Bank. Your very next paragraph was perfect. Multinational institutions like the World Bank, where U.S. donations will merge with funding streams from other international donors, has the potential to reduce transparency and oversight of your contributions. Have you assure me that the World Bank, because I'm very concerned, because the World Bank is independent of U.S. government. So we are sending our contributions through the World Bank, I understand. They are then merged with other donations to Ukraine. Have you audited the World Bank?
So to be clear, the USAID OIG doesn't have jurisdiction or authority to audit the World Bank,
Okay.
but we have access to all of those reports that are being provided to USAID, the agency, and as an independent monitor and experts, we are assessing those reports as they come in, and if we see indicators of fraud that would warrant a deeper dive from an independent perspective that our agency provides, we will do that deeper dive. To date, we have not seen any significant issues like that.
Okay, I don't have time to get into it. I would also like for you to look at the deep relationships between Deloitte and the World Bank. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Sherman for 5 minutes.
Thank you. We've been talking about the level of aid that we provide compared to other countries. I think this is a good investment in America's security and in world security. That being said, we should be pushing on our European friends. We are doing more, even on we're doing more than Europe in total. We're doing more as a per capita, as Mr. Wilson pointed out, other than 4 countries. But keep in mind, Bulgaria doesn't have a fleet in the Pacific, in effect, defending Taiwan. Lithuania doesn't have a responsibility to fight ISIS in Syria. And so if Europeans should be spending, I think, more on this. And in general, we understate when we report to the American people and when we tell our European friends how much we're spending on national security by deliberately not including veterans' costs. And the veterans' benefits are part of how we compensate our troops. Under generally accepted accounting principles, that's certainly a cost of our defense. I now want to focus on this idea that we should have a certified audit of what defense articles we're providing Ukraine. I watch a lot of World War II movies, and they're pretty similar. There's always somebody for each part of the audience to identify with. There's the New Yorker, there's the Southerner, there's the Italian American, there's the Irish American, and I keep waiting for my people. And then you see D-Day, and the landing craft comes in, and the door opens, and out come the auditors. They've all got green eye shades on. They're carrying their 10 key adding machines from the 1940s. There are my people. Netflix has everything. And so throughout war, of course, certified audits have kept track of every shell and every bullet. But more to the point, it's hard to have a certified audit even of a Defense Department at peace. Mr. Storch, it's the every other part of the federal government has since the certainly since 2023, have satisfied the requirements of an external audit, except the Department of Defense. As of November 2022, the Defense Department had failed its 5th ever audit, unable to account for more than half its assets. After 1,600 auditors combed through the DoD's $3.5 trillion in assets and $3.7 trillion in liabilities, officials found that the department could not account for about 61% of the assets, according to the Pentagon's controller. Is it reasonable for us to think that we can that the Ukrainian military could pass an audit in war when we can't pass one in peace?
So first of all, thank you, Congressman, for the very compelling portrait of auditors. My folks will appreciate it. With regard to your question, I'm really not in a position to comment on the Ukrainians. What I will say is, on the American side, we are doing robust work to do oversight over the department's finances, and particularly focused on the systems that are being used to account for the assistance to Ukraine.
I want to thank all the Inspector Generals for your work and yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes Mr. Baird for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it, and I appreciate all the witnesses being here. My first question goes to Ms. Anguilera. In a statement last month, you mentioned, quote, "But for real comprehensive, robust oversight, it can't be done remotely. The closer we are, the more comprehensive the oversight will be." So my question is, can you provide me the steps that your department has taken to check the use of assistance to Ukraine once it's in the country, since you mentioned it previously? And additionally, can you tell me how many auditors have been sent to the Ukraine?
Sure. Thank you, Congressman, for that question. To date, to be clear, we have had no permanent staff assigned to Embassy Kyiv. USAID OIG is unique because we do have foreign service staff and personnel who are willing and ready to go. We are in the process, as I mentioned, with our colleagues here to go through the State Department process requesting those permanent positions. To date, besides my colleague and I who went for the day in January, we've had 2 investigators that were just able to go in TDY for 3 days this week. They were law enforcement criminal agents doing fraud awareness briefings and working on MOUs that we are having signed with 5 separate government agencies with within the government of Ukraine. To date, we have not personally had any auditors go TDY or go to Ukraine. How we're doing our work, as I mentioned, on the direct budget support, we are reviewing all of the reports that are coming in from the World Bank, from Deloitte, and from USAID, and ones that are being submitted to Congress and that we have access to, and are taking an independent assessment to see if there are any red flags that would warrant a further deep dive from our office. But that being said, we are also, I think we mentioned our hotline poster, which we distributed within Ukraine, is widely circulated right now, hence the 556% increase in the reports that have come to us. So there are ways that we are being able to do our work effectively, but I think to be as comprehensive as we possibly can be, nothing replaces eyes on the ground, seeing the programming happening and making those relationships.
So thank you. And then I want to turn to all the witnesses, and that question deals with the Ukrainian government. And have they been proactive and helpful partner to to provide these oversights? And how willing has the Ukrainians been to open their books and allow full transparency of how assistance is being used? So all 3 witnesses, I want to start with Ms. Shaw.
Thank you for your question. So it is still early days, but I think we've made a really good start. When we were there in January, the three of us had the opportunity to meet with a range of well-positioned and important Ukrainian officials within the government. And so we conveyed a very unambiguous message about the American expectations around transparency and accountability. As I said in my opening, that message was well received at the time, but of course the proof is in the pudding. And so we are building on those initial interactions to deepen our relationships, to identify trusted partners, not just within the Ukrainian government, but in law enforcement, within the prosecutorial entities as well. And so while we haven't met with any resistance to date, and so far there's been broad willingness, we're continuing to press that.
Ms. Angarella?
Yeah, I would echo all of that and say that to date, our office is in the process and have received commitments and in some instances are sharing drafts of an MOU with the Prosecutor General, with NABU, with SAPA, which is the Special Prosecutor for Anti-Corruption, with the Ministry of Finance, with the Economic Security Bureau, and with the Ministry of Infrastructure. So those are all tangible MOUs that are in the works right now between my office and these government entities. In addition, we have agents there right now that are working on establishing additional relationships and then implementation of how this is going to look. We can have MOUs, but what does it look like to say we agree to share information? And that's happening by our two investigators that have been there the last 3 days. So making significant steps towards that as expeditiously as we can.
And I see the limited time. I'd echo all of that. And I suppose the other thing I'd add is that we're working very closely together on this as well. So we're able to partner to ensure that we're leveraging one another's experiences there. So between us and then the larger working group, we're really able to do this.
So maybe we can start with you next time and you'll have more time, okay? Thank you very much. I yield back.